6 minutes. That's all you asked for. Then it became 9, then 15. And somewhere in that stretched out, half-conscious negotiation with your own alarm clock, you made a decision far bigger than just 5 more minutes. You decided, without meaning to, what kind of year this is going to be. Here's a question most people never let themselves sit with. If a camera had been running for your last 30 mornings, and you watched the footage back tonight, would you be proud of the person on that screen? Or would you see the same quiet surrender on repeat 30 times in a row? This isn't a video about waking up earlier. Plenty of those exist, and most of them are useless by 9 a.m. This is a video about something most people never examine. The fact that the way you handle the first 10 minutes of your day is a rehearsal for the way you handle everything else in it. The way you talk yourself out of getting up is the exact same voice, using the exact same tricks that later talks you out of the harder things. The workout, the conversation you've been avoiding, the goal you keep starting in January and abandoning by March. Jim Rohn built an entire philosophy around one uncomfortable idea. Discipline is a bridge between who you are and who you want to become. And almost nobody wants to walk across it because it's cold on that bridge and nobody's clapping for you while you cross it. There's no trophy for getting out of bed. No one films you not hitting snooze. And that is exactly the point. The mornings that actually change a life are almost never dramatic while they're happening. I want to be honest with you about something before we go further. You don't have a motivation problem. You have never had a motivation problem. Motivation is unreliable by design. It shows up when it wants to and leaves the same way, usually right around the point where the alarm actually goes off. What you're missing isn't motivation. It's a decision made once, in advance, before the version of you that negotiates for 9 more minutes ever gets a vote. If any part of what I just said landed somewhere real, if you felt that quiet gap between the person you're becoming and the person your mornings are actually building, put it in the comments. Tell me what your mornings have looked like this month. I read every one of them, and I promise you're not the only person who's been hitting snooze on more than an alarm clock. Because here's what's coming next, and it's the part most people skip past without ever really understanding it. There are only 2 kinds of pain available to you in this life, and one of them is currently costing you a lot more than you realize. Let's start with the idea nobody wants to hear, because it's the one that actually changes something. Jim Rohn used to put it simply: discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. You don't get to skip pain in this life. Nobody does, regardless of how good their circumstances are. The only real choice you get is which pain you take on and when. The pain of discipline is small and it arrives on schedule. It's the cold floor at 5:30. It's closing the laptop before the show finishes. It's showing up to the gym on the one day you really didn't want to. It's over in a matter of minutes, and what it leaves behind is a person who is very slightly stronger than they were the day before. The pain of regret doesn't work that way. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't collect all at once. It gathers quietly. One skipped morning, one I'll start Monday, one scroll session that ate the only free hour you had. And it doesn't hand you the bill until years later, all at once, with interest attached. Most people never connect the ache they feel at 45 to the 1,000 small mornings they gave away in their 20s and 30s. They just feel the weight and call it bad luck. Here's why this matters more than it sounds like it should. Your mornings are not a separate category of your life, cut off from the rest of it. They are your life, replayed in miniature every single day. The way you negotiate with your alarm clock is the exact same negotiation you have with your goals. 5 more minutes at 6 a.m. has a way of quietly becoming 1 more year at 35. I'll start at sunrise becomes I'll start next quarter. Small surrenders don't stay small. They compound, the same way discipline does, just in the other direction. This is the part that tends to catch people off guard the first time they really hear it. You are not a fundamentally different person at 6 a.m. than you are at 6 p.m. You're the same person, making the same kind of decision, just in a smaller, quieter room where nobody else is watching. And that's exactly why it matters so much. Character was never built in the loud, filmed, applauded moments. It's built in the ones nobody sees, the ones where you kept a promise to yourself that only you would ever know about. Most people carry around a version of this thought without ever saying it out loud. I've tried the early mornings before. It didn't work. Maybe I'm just not built for it. I want to answer that honestly, because there's a piece of it that's true and a piece of it that's a trap. You probably did try, and it probably didn't feel like it was working for a while. What almost nobody tells you is that nothing you plant blooms the same day you plant it. Not one seed in the history of agriculture has ever broken the surface within 24 hours. And yet we plant one disciplined morning, check for results by Thursday, and rip the whole thing out of the ground the moment we don't see a transformed life staring back at us. That's not evidence the plan failed. That's evidence you left the field before the harvest. So let's talk about what actually goes in the ground, because wake up earlier on its own is not a plan. It's a wish wearing a plan's clothing. Here's the law that governs every field, every harvest, and every single morning of your life. Whether you've noticed it or not, you reap what you sow, not what you meant to sow, not what you intended, what you actually planted. Point that law at your alarm clock for a second. Every morning you rise when you said you would, and you spend the first hour with some intention instead of by accident, you're planting something whose harvest you may not see for months. Every morning you sow 9 extra minutes of hiding under a warm blanket. You're planting something too. It just doesn't grow into anything you'll be proud to harvest later. Here's the actual mechanics of what to plant, because this is where most advice gets it wrong by making it sound too big. You don't need a 5-hour morning routine with cold plunges and 11 ingredients in a blender. That's not a ladder. That's a fantasy. And it's designed to make you feel like a failure by day 4, because nobody sustains that. What you need is one rung. One thing small enough that it feels almost embarrassing to call it discipline. Wake up 15 minutes earlier than you do right now. Not 3 hours. 15 minutes. Do it until it stops being a decision and simply becomes who you are. Then add the next rung. 10 pages of a real book instead of 10 more minutes on your phone. 20 minutes of movement before the day gets a chance to make demands of your body. 5 quiet minutes with a notebook, deciding what actually matters today before the world hands you its own list of what it thinks should matter to you instead. None of this will feel like a transformation while it's happening. It will feel like 10 pages. It will feel like 20 minutes. That is precisely what compounding looks like from the inside, early on. Quiet, almost invisible, and easy to underestimate. Here's the arithmetic, because sometimes a philosophy needs a little math behind it to actually land. 10 pages a day, every day, for 1 year, is well over 3,000 pages. Somewhere around 15 to 20 books, fully read, from a habit so small it barely registered as effort on any single morning. Stretch that same 10 pages across 5 years, and you're somewhere near 100 books deep into whatever you chose to study, while the people around you are still saying, I really should read more. The exact same sentence they were saying 5 years earlier. That's the whole secret hiding inside this. It was never about one enormous effort made once. It's about something small, repeated consistently, for long enough that time itself starts doing the heavy lifting for you. And here's an angle worth sitting with before we go further. This was never really about the wake-up time. Jim Rohn's real argument wasn't mornings are magic. It's that mornings are evidence. Evidence gathered daily of what you actually believe about your own future, collected before the rest of the world gets a chance to talk you out of it. Let's deal honestly with the excuse that's probably sitting in the back of your mind right now, because pretending it doesn't exist would be dishonest. I'm not a morning person. My schedule doesn't allow it. My life isn't as simple as it sounds in a video. I'm not going to insult you by pretending circumstances don't matter. They genuinely do. And anyone telling you otherwise is usually selling something. But here's the distinction that changes everything. If you actually let it sink in, it isn't your job, your kids, your commute, or the family you were born into that decides your mornings. It's your philosophy. 2 people can carry nearly identical circumstances, same income, same demands, same 24 hours, and end up with completely different lives, because one of them operates from this is happening to me, and the other operates from this is happening, and I still get to decide what I do inside of it. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the point where people twist responsibility into something cruel toward themselves. Taking responsibility for your life is not the same thing as blaming yourself for everything that's ever happened to you. You are not responsible for the disadvantages stacked against you before you could speak. But you are entirely responsible for what you build with whatever is left over. And uncomfortable as that is to hear, it happens to be the most liberating thing you'll ever pick up. Because if the causes were all external, so would the cure be. And that would leave you genuinely powerless. You're not powerless. At most, you're currently undirected. This is the moment in the video where the real value shows up. So stay with me here. Because this next part is the difference between a video you watched and a decision you actually made. If any of this has been useful so far, this is a good moment to like the video and send it to someone who needs to hear it too, because chances are there's a person in your life fighting this exact same battle with their own alarm clock. Now, here's the part almost nobody says out loud, and it's the piece that actually reframes everything you thought you understood about trying harder. Most people, when they fail at a new habit, quietly convert that failure into an identity. They fail in January, and by February they've decided, I am a failure, instead of the far more accurate, I am currently in a season. A farmer standing in a frozen field in December doesn't conclude that farming doesn't work for him. He knows exactly what winter is for. Repairing tools, studying last year's harvest, preparing for ground that isn't ready yet. Your last failed attempt at this exact habit wasn't a verdict on your character. That was winter. And winter always ends, but only for the people who don't quit the field. Here's a layer to this that most people never think to examine, and it might be the most important idea in this entire video. You are quietly becoming an average of the conversations you have most often, the habits you watch closest, and the opinions you let carry the most weight. If everyone around you treats ambition like something a little embarrassing to admit out loud, it becomes genuinely difficult to be the one person in that room quietly choosing to rise before everyone else does. Not impossible, just difficult. And difficult, given enough years, tends to win. Unless you notice it happening and choose your rooms more deliberately. This isn't a call to cut people out of your life. It's a call to notice, honestly, which voices are handing you permission to grow, and which ones are quietly handing you permission to stay exactly where you already are. Some of the most important seats in that room aren't even people. They're the books you choose, the voices you let into your ears on the way to work, and how often you actually let yourself picture the person you're capable of becoming. I also want to warn you about something before this video ends, because it's going to try to sabotage you the moment it does. The instant you decide to change, some part of you goes looking for a shortcut. The one hack, the one app, the one system that lets you skip the unglamorous middle part and land straight at the results. I need to tell you plainly, that shortcut has never existed. What exists is a ladder. And a ladder by its very design cannot be skipped. You climb one rung, then the next. There has never been a version of this that involves teleporting to the top. There's one more layer here worth sitting with, because it changes how you think about every morning from this point forward. You are not simply building a routine. You are building a person. Every time you rise when you said you would, you're casting a small, quiet vote for who you actually are. Not the version you post about, but the one your behavior at 5:30 a.m., with nobody watching, reveals you to be. And every time you don't, you're voting the other way. There is no neutral morning. There's no version of today that doesn't count toward who you're becoming. Think about the people you admire most. I'd guess it isn't really their talent that pulls you toward them. It's their consistency. The sense that you know what they'll do tomorrow because you watched what they did today and yesterday and the day before that. That's not an accident of personality. That's the accumulated residue of 1,000 small, unglamorous repetitions, each one a brick laid on top of the last, until the bricks stopped looking like effort and started looking like character. You are laying your own bricks this week, whether you notice it or not. The only real question left is whether you're laying them on purpose, toward a structure you actually chose, or by accident, toward whatever shape convenience happens to hand you. Let's bring all of this down out of philosophy and into tomorrow morning specifically, because a lesson you don't apply within 24 hours is usually a lesson you never apply at all. Decide your wake-up time tonight, before you go to sleep. Not tomorrow morning, half-conscious, thumb hovering over snooze. A decision made in that state isn't really a decision. It's a negotiation, and you will lose almost every negotiation with a version of yourself still half lost in a dream. The moment the alarm sounds, move your feet to the floor before your mind gets a chance to open a debate. Thinking at 5:30 is just a polite word for negotiating your way back under the covers. Protect the first 20 to 60 minutes of your day for the person you're trying to become. Not the employee, not the parent, not the one answering everyone else's messages yet. That might look like movement, reminding your body it's alive before the day starts making demands of it. It might look like 10 pages of something that sharpens you rather than something that simply entertains you. It might look like 5 minutes with a notebook, deciding what actually matters today before the world hands you its own list instead. And one more thing, which might matter more than all the rest combined. Keep your phone out of the first half hour of your day. The instant you open a screen full of other people's opinions and other people's highlight reels, you've handed the steering wheel of your morning to strangers. You cannot build a disciplined life while the very first act of your day is surrendering your attention to whoever shouted loudest on the internet overnight. I want to leave you with one image before we close, because I think it says more than any single piece of advice could. Picture two versions of yourself 5 years from today. Same starting point, same talent, same opportunities. The only variable that's different is what each version chose to do with their mornings. One version kept hitting snooze, kept saying, "I'll start Monday," until he eventually stopped mentioning Monday at all. Busy constantly, somehow never further ahead. The other version isn't smarter or luckier. She simply made one decision, and then made it again the next day, and the next, until it stopped being a decision and simply became who she was. She's calmer, not because her life has fewer problems, but because 5 years of mornings built someone capable of handling problems without being ruled by them. The distance between those two people was never talent. It was never luck. It was 5 years of mornings, quietly multiplied into two completely different lives. You are going to become one of those two people, whether you consciously decide to or not. Time doesn't wait for your decision. It just keeps moving and turns whatever you plant or fail to plant into a harvest either way. So here's the whole philosophy, compressed into one sentence. Simple enough to remember at 5:30 a.m. when no part of you wants to move. How you wake up is how you live. Nobody is coming to make this decision for you. Not your job, not your circumstances, not this video, and not the 6 a.m. version of yourself who will still, every so often, try to negotiate for 9 more minutes. If this actually meant something to you today, if you want more of this in your life, not just once, but as an ongoing habit, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. Set your alarm tonight. Not for the person you've been until now, for the person you're finally done waiting to become. Master your life.